So it's not like you're going to go around and tell everybody, oh, I'm a financial mess because of my divorce. It seems to have a bit of a stigma about it. Divorced women over 50 face 45% drop in income compared to men 20 to 25%.
No, I don't think so. I think that people don't actually give a whole lot of thought to the change in financial status during a divorce and a separation because I think they're probably focused on just wanting that emotional pain to end and the situation to end and to be able to move on with their life. She had actually rebuilt her finances, but she still had that lingering anxiety around, like, am I making good decisions? Am I being a good steward of my money? And that was lingering from her time of her first marriage and the self doubt that can be created around money within a marriage. You're a stay at home mom, even if you're better at the finances, when the kids come into the picture, a lot of women do take a step out of that role and sort of like just ignore it. But then if they get divorced, they have to learn all those things over again. And all of that stuff, once they're actually divorced, is going to be doubled. So now you need two of everything.
It doesn't seem to be quite the same level of of interest or of women doing it more than men. So I think sometimes we as women have fallen back a bit. Society's kind of programmed us this way. Or to be honest with you, I just wasn't interested. Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. Hi, I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I draw on years of personal and professional experience to guide you through the challenges of your divorce. Together, with our expert guests, we'll equip you with the clarity, resilience, and tools to take charge and move forward with confidence. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many different facets of divorce. Hi, welcome to the Just Separated podcast. I'm your host, Karen Oman, and co-founder of the Divorce Workshop. Today we're going to be talking about money, grief, and identity post-separation or divorce, and our guest expert is Sabrina Alton. Sabrina is a financial coach and founder of Insights Financial Coaching. Sabrina coaches women to be more confident and less anxious about money. She does this by looking beyond the numbers to gain insights into women's money's histories, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors regarding money. Sabrina, welcome to the Just Separated podcast.
Thank you, Karen. I'm happy to be here.
So, I'm a grief counselor and grief educator. So when you brought up the topic, let's talk about grief and identity and with money, I thought, yeah, this would be really important conversation because many of us who go through divorce, I think we know, okay, our lifestyle is going to change. But I don't know if everyone recognizes the big grief element of that type of loss. So do you think divorcing people really understand how much grief there is with the change of the financial status and that with their identity as well?
No, I don't think so. I think that people don't actually give a whole lot of thought to the change in financial status during a divorce and a separation because I think they're probably focused on just wanting that emotional pain to end and the situation to end and to be able to move on with their life, that they don't necessarily think about the finances. And even if they do, knowing something intellectually is different than experiencing the reality of it, the day-to-day reality of it. And yeah, I don't know if people really think about that change of identity in terms of going from married to not married. And when you're separated, I'm in a community property state, so we don't have legal separation. So even though my husband has moved out and our living situation is separated, we're not legally separated. So in terms of the identity, it gets really confusing for me personally because do I say that I'm married, right? I don't feel right saying that he's my ex because we're not officially divorced yet, but yet my day-to-day reality is that we are separated. Um, and yeah, just going from that being a part of a family and There's so much wrapped into it. Like, how does your extended family address you at the holidays? How do they address the Christmas cards, for example? How do you sign your Christmas cards? Do you include his name or not? I think some of it becomes more clear when you do divorce, but if you're in that separation phase, it can be very murky.
Do you find that, identity as well as the grief around the finances, and I talked to you a bit about this before, is often disenfranchised. So in my world, it's unrecognized. So I think society knows, okay, they're getting divorced or they're divorcing wherever you are, community or no fault divorce, whatever. But or not no fault divorce, but you know what I mean. Anyways, disenfranchised meaning like they don't really understand. Society doesn't really understand how hard it is financially. And as you said at the beginning, I don't think many people who are going through it understand the actual how hard it is to go through it financially. And you're mentioning to me before how little things can creep up that people don't think about. But also, I don't think you don't really get recognized. People don't really recognize how hard it is, the financial grief about this divorce. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I definitely agree with that. And um, like you said, it can be all these little things that used to be joint. Like this morning, I was dealing with an Amazon Prime membership, and all of that stuff, once you're actually divorced, is going to be doubled. So now you need two of everything. We're also going through trying to get my daughter to stay at her dad's apartment, but he doesn't necessarily have everything there, like for her lunches and things like that. So you have to double all of those costs, all of your fixed costs. And it's really hard in this economy in terms of housing prices. Like just housing prices alone are going to affect you. And there can be grief if you have to give up the family home, especially if you were a stay at home mom. And a lot of times, women do want to keep the family home, but that might not actually be in their financial interest, and it might hurt them a lot to keep the family home. But it can be tremendously emotionally difficult to give up the family home. And part of the reason why I say that um, keeping the family home could harm them financially is that your home is an illiquid asset. So if you go into debt, you can't just like take money out of your home. I mean, yes, there's home equity line of credit, but to actually pull the equity out of your house, you need to sell it. Whereas if you have something like investments, those are a liquid asset that you can just sell tomorrow. You might take a tax hit depending on where you're pulling it from, but you can easily get access to that money. And if the woman keeps the family home, she might not have as much in investable assets, and so she might have a lot of her equity in a illiquid asset. And if that, roof needs to be replaced or windows need to be replaced or your air conditioning, like I'm constantly fixing our heat pump every single year. We live in Texas. So it's costing me a lot of money. And you might not think about that of all of those costs when you're going through the divorce, right? You might just think, what's the cost of the mortgage? But you might not think about, can I financially handle it if the property taxes go up, if the insurance goes up, if the air condition breaks, if I need to replace my windows? Um, and that's where a lot of financial impact can come in, grief and identity.
Can you tell me, like, this has come up before with even clients? Is there a real or what is the real reason moms want to stay in the home? Like, do you know, like, is it the emotional because their kids are there, or do they think that's the biggest asset and we have to keep it? Um, do you know why? Like,
Yeah.
because I've heard it with clients, Sabrina. It's like, no, I got to keep the
Mhm.
home. I have to keep the home. And I just want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's tied up into multiple things depending on how long you've lived in the home. You might not want to move your kids from what they're familiar with and and where they feel comfortable. Um, you might also like the home. Again, like I'm also a stay-at-home mom as well as a business owner, and so I spend all my time in the home, right? And so this is kind of my domain, and it adds another huge layer of change on top of a divorce, which a divorce is already a ton of change and painful. So to add that other layer of change might be going a bit too far. I do think it is primarily emotional. I don't think it is, this is the biggest asset type of thing. I think it can also be tied into identity as a homeowner because both in Canada and in the US, our culture incentivizes us and encourages us to be homeowners. And like, there's just a lot built around that. And that's kind of part of the American dream is being a homeowner. And so I think we're just culturally encouraged to become a homeowner, and that's a marker of success. But that is also unattainable these days because the price of housing has gone up so tremendously, but also the price of rent has gone up too. So you're kind of in a trickier situation because you could be coming into a very different economy when you get divorced than when you were married.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I want to dig a little bit deeper into, you and I are both stay-at-home mothers,
Hmm.
and in my thoughts are that is like there's can be even more grief because you also have the financial stuff you have to deal with. You have to find a career or a job now when you didn't before. The financial stress can be much harder for some that have not worked. What are your feelings on that?
Yeah, it's really hard as a stay-at-home mom. And I just wanted to add to the previous piece too, like you might not want to change your child's school district if you like the schools your kids are in. That could be another piece of not wanting to give up the home. But yeah, as a stay-at-home mom, it's even more challenging because again, like I'm lucky that I am in a community property state because a lot of the assets were in my husband's name since he was the one earning the income. And like if that were just to be divided based on whose name is on the asset, I would lose out financially tremendously, right? Like he's the one with the 401k. You can set up a spousal IRA. We never necessarily did it. And even if we did it, the amount that you can contribute to a spousal IRA is so much less than what you can contribute to a 401k. So there's just you have the earning potential differences. Like his earning potential is already much higher from being in the workforce. Not to say that you can't go and earn an equivalent level, but it takes time to ramp up and to get back in. And depending on how long you've been out of the workforce, there can be a lot of self doubt about even just things like resume writing is kind of a hurdle for me, right? Like resume writing, self doubt of like, do I have these skills? Have I lost my ability to interact with people because I've just been around my kids and my cats, you know? Um, and just knowing your worth, right? Like being able to negotiate your worth or take a job that actually pays you what you really are worth, to be honest.
Yeah, so it is a lot. It is a lot. I just wanted to do a stat here that for a lot of women, divorce can be an economic earthquake. That I think I told you the stat: divorced women over 50 face 45% drop in income compared to men 20 to 25%. So there's quite a bit of difference in the financial status after divorce.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the differences in finances between the genders to begin with. Because women, even though this is starting to change, it's still true that women get paid less compared to men. women still take out more time from their career to look after their kids or elderly parents. And women tend to live longer, so they need that money to stretch longer, right? And when you add all those together, you get the compounding effect. And even though we see more and more women go to college and graduate from college and start off earning more than in the past, we still see them kind of hit that um, family stage and pull out of the employment marketplace.
Yeah, which makes it hard because you've lost all that time to then when you divorce 10, 15, 20 years to
Yes.
make that up, right? Like we talked about before. So another thing I was thinking about is a lot of people don't talk about financial loss, like because it's not really socially acceptable. So it's not like you're going to go around and tell everybody, "Oh, I'm a financial mess because of my divorce." It seems to have a bit of a stigma about it, like that people don't want to talk about it with others about the financial change. I don't know if you've seen that.
Well, I think money is just a taboo topic in general, so people just don't really like to talk about their financial position in general, because it can be a bit awkward. But yeah, that can also be um, like an identity and a financial impact of divorce is maybe you can't afford to go out with your friends as much as you used to. Like if you were a stay-at-home mom who went to lunch or to coffee with other stay-at-home moms regularly, maybe that's something you can't do anymore. And so that's another shift. Or if you're a stay-at-home mom again, meeting other stay-at-home moms and you have to go back into the workforce, then you've kind of lost that social group because now you're working instead of having that time to meet with them.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's like there's layers of loss here, right? Like
Yes.
that one it there's a bit of embarrassment about it, about like, okay, I can't go to my friend's coffee do coffee at Starbucks every day now or every other day. Or as you said, I can't afford to go out to all these nice dinners like I used to before. And the thing that I see in my world is that kind of isolates you
Hmm.
because you're not socially, you don't feel you're socially equal anymore. Do you understand what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah. Hmm.
the Smiths over there, well, they're still going to Cabo all the time, and I can't do that. So there's a tendency to kind of just internalize it and isolate and not talk about it or um, express it. Which, as you said, money's emotional. Lots of people don't talk about it, anyways. It's just that these are things that people who, when they're going through divorce, they need to be aware that they can be feeling this way, right? And that to me can be almost like a grief feeling, right? Like things have changed, and it's bothersome. It's bothersome, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be specifically because you're divorced, because a lot of people are taking vacations that they're just putting on credit cards and can't pay off. Um, but I actually used to be a family travel blogger, and my family and I, we did a 6 month round the world trip when my kids were young. And now we travel separately. Now it's like if I travel, it's just by myself. Now, part of that is not just due to the separation, but that is a key component of it. And again, like, how do you navigate all those issues of do we still travel as a family or do we travel separately? Are we still a family or are we not really a family? It can get really complicated.
Yeah, I guess that would depends on the uniqueness of each couple, right?
Yes.
Because
Hmm.
some couples, I was talking to somebody that they do nesting, where they take turns in the matrimonial home, and it works wonderfully. Where other people, there's no way they could ever do that, right? So it's so unique with everybody's situation.
Yeah, and the ability to do nesting again depends on being in a financially privileged position. We're sort of half nesting where I'm at the house with the girls and then their dad comes over here to do his parenting time with them. But that, again, that negatively impacts my ability to move forward in my own identity and my own life if they're always here and he's here. Because then I no longer have just my own space. I no longer feel like I can have people over here or things like that. So it's not always, even if it might be the best for the kids, it might not be the best for the parents.
Yeah, exactly. Again, back to uniqueness of each divorcing couple. So what are some things like how do you so there's a lot of grief we talked about identity. So how do you with your clients, how do you help them start understanding the loss but also helping them with their identity with regards to money so um, they can feel better or start feeling more empowered as they go through their divorce?
It just depends on where they're at. So some of my clients have already been through the divorce. Some are just staying separated, and some are likely to go through the process. But so, for example, somebody who is already divorced, she had actually rebuilt her finances, but she still had that lingering anxiety around, like, am I making good decisions? Am I being a good steward of my money? And that was lingering from her time of her first marriage and the self doubt that can be created around money within a marriage. Um, and so with her, it's like coaching her of, yes, you're doing the right thing. Yes, you're doing really well financially, and instilling that confidence and self belief in her. With somebody who isn't divorced yet and is just kind of at the beginning of the process, with them, I would really want to educate them on, like we talked about before, liquid versus illiquid assets. And um, like I have one client right now who she wants to be able to run different scenarios of what would my finances look like if I lived in this state versus this state, or what would my finances look like if I bought a house that was worth this amount of money versus this amount of money. And so we can run through some of those scenarios so that she has an idea of the financial impact of different decisions. And I would just want women to kind of go into it with eyes wide open, knowing about like different tax treatments of different assets, how easily you can get to different assets. And a message I always want to give them, which is really hard for them to receive, is like, don't settle and don't underestimate your worth, and don't try to get a deal just so it can be over with, which is usually what ends up happening. Is they're like, I just want this to be over with, so I'm going to agree to X, Y, Z. Um,
Yeah, I have a an accountant in Toronto who um, I know quite well, and he said that he's looked after some of the separation agreements that we have up here in Canada, and he's like he had to say, "I'm not, we can't do this. You're signing way too much away."
yeah,
Because he got a good picture of the finances, and so he had to he stopped it, and and the woman went back and got a better agreement, right? Because
yeah.
they didn't know anybody. I just wanted to just quickly tell our audience what's can you just name some of the liquid and non-liquid assets so people kind of understand that?
Well, a non-liquid, again, primarily is a house or property. Like if you own land, or like a physical business or your house, because again, um, you can't just go to the bank and take out money from your house. You have to sell your house to get the money that you put into the house back out of it, right? And so I think part of the reason why governments have encouraged home ownership is it's kind of like a forced savings account, that when you retire, if you decide to sell your house, you have that chunk of money that can then pay for like a retirement residence, for example. But that doesn't work if you want to age in place. And so if you want to stay in your home, you have to have other assets that are going to give you money that you can live off of in retirement. And your investment in a stock market would be one of those assets, because you can sell stocks like, at the snap of the finger. As long as the stock market is open, you just go and sell your stocks and then you have the money. And then you draw from that to pay your living expenses, right? So
Yeah.
that is like a liquid asset. And like savings accounts, CDs, tax-free savings account, mutual funds, treasury bills, bonds, stocks, those are all very liquid because you can get access to the money very easily.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that many women
Hmm.
in general, because for some reason it seems to be that we all have a role in marriage, and except for you who have the education background in it, most of us just aren't all that interested in that type of stuff, or that's the man likes to do it, or he takes over. So it seems to be a common thing that with the financial stuff, that it tends to be, not always, to be
Yeah.
men do this part, and the women, or they buy the groceries and pay the gas
Yeah.
bill. But
Hmm.
when it comes to investments and all that type of stuff, it doesn't seem to be quite the same level of of interest, or of women doing it more than men. So I think sometimes we as women have fallen back a bit. Society's kind of programmed us this way, or, to be honest with you, I just wasn't interested. Um,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, I do think it's both. It's like your interest level, and we are socialized to, like you said, women to be, if we are involved in the money, to manage like the household budget of grocery shopping and kids' clothing and all of that. But generally, the husband sort of socialized to invest, even though research has shown that women do make better investors because we're not as likely to follow like the next hot stock tip, which is kind of what men are socialized to do, and that's not always good for them financially. Um, but going back to, if you're a stay-at-home mom, even if you're better at the finances, when the kids come into the picture, a lot of women do take a step out of that role and sort of like just ignore it. But then if they get divorced, they have to learn all those things over again. So I also like help coach women on how to reestablish those skills. Um, Sometimes if you've kind of checked out of the finances, you might not know of all the assets that your family has. And that's where I would encourage women who are getting divorced to seek out a certified financial divorce analyst, because they can track down all of the assets. And they can also help tell you, like which assets have different tax treatments and which assets will grow at different rates in the future, because the future value of the assets are also important, right? Like if you own a property in a state that isn't really growing, or where the home insurance is skyrocketing and nobody wants to move there anymore, then that's less valuable than an asset that is projected to grow in the future. And also for stay-at-home moms, it's really hard to negotiate your worth, because there's a lot of self-doubt around your worth when there's not a financial number attached to it. And we're contributing just as equally to the relationship, but because we don't get paid like an income, it's hard to kind of stand up for ourselves and say like, no, this is what I'm worth, right? Like I actually have a master's in political science, and I used to work for the government of Canada as an international trade negotiator. And if I project that income out to today, I'm be like, this is my lost income, right? This is where I would be if I stayed in the workforce. This is my worth, and I'll negotiate that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I just a flashbulb moment for me is there was an article. I had my two daughters by then, and I was stay at home. And there was an article on how much a house mother or mother stay at home mom are actually worth, and we're actually worth quite a lot because of what we do.
Hmm.
But when I told my ex that over dinner, he laughed about it. Right? So there's a society doesn't put it up there, Sabrina, like it's Meanwhile, it's to me, it's like one of the most important jobs you can do by raising good, stable children, or trying to, anyways. And
Yeah.
so I'm just saying, in my own little pet peeve here is kind of the devaluing of what our jobs were, and how you're. It's hard to put a number on it, but there is a number on it, and
Yes.
society doesn't always, respect that, or value. They say they value it, but when it comes to money, I'm not sure they really value it.
Yes, and when push comes to shove, even if you married a quote unquote good man, when push comes to shove, you don't know what he's going to do. Because again, in a patriarchal society, he might think like, this is my money. I'm the one that's going to work and earning this income. But it's like, no, this is family money. Again, I'm speaking from a stay-at-home mom point of view. Like, this is family money, right? It's not your money, it's our money. But in times of stress, that's what his mind is telling him, is like, I'm the one going to work. I deserve this. Like, you're living off of me. And there's a lot of shame involved in that too. But us women, like, we do have to stand up for ourselves and our value. We do have to learn how to invest and get comfortable with that and get comfortable with building family wealth, for our families and our communities.
Hmm. So, have we? Is there anything that we missed in our topic today? I don't that you'd like to tell anybody about before I ask you the last question?
I would just say that in the separation phase, there's so much like lack of clarity and confusion, and it's the murky middle. And that's kind of where I am right now because I'm not divorced yet. I've been separated for going on to 2 years. Um, and that's tricky to grieve and have your identity shift when you haven't taken that final step. And, like when you're still looking after the kids and when you're trying to um, get an income for yourself, right? That it's hard to have that space to really grieve and process all these changes that are happening.
Yeah, that seems to be, as you said, 9 states are community.
Yeah, about 9 states are common property states, community property states. Yeah.
So you're not so until you divorce, that's when the value of the house, etc., is done.
Yeah, so what that means, so I'm in Texas, for example, so you're either legally married or you're legally divorced. There's no in between. So even if my husband takes out a different checking account in his own name and I'm not on his credit cards anymore and my name is not on his 401k or anything like that, anything earned during the marriage is joint property, right? And it's only when you get divorced that you negotiate the split of assets. But from the court's point of view, everything that was earned during the marriage is joint property versus, well, that's in his name, so that's his property. The only exception to that is separate property like an inheritance. Like, so he did get an inheritance, and that's not part of community property. Now, in some ways, it benefits me because, again, as a stay at home mom, as long as he's earning money, half of that basically I'm entitled to. But it also can be a risk to me because, let's say I was in an abusive situation, I wouldn't really be able to set up a separate, like, bank account. Like, I could set it up, but that money that I put there is still joint money. Like, I have no way to financially separate from him so that I can get away from him if you're in that type of situation. So that's where it gets a bit more challenging.
Yeah, thanks for sharing about that because that's 9 states is quite a bit of people that have the same type of situation as you do.
Yeah, and California and Texas, which are, two of the biggest states here, and then some states you can opt into community property state.
Oh.
Yeah.
So before I wrap, like finish, I always ask every guest this last question. I think you kind of answered it in the podcast, but I'll get you to say it again. For someone who's just separated, whether they were left or were left, what advice would you give them to help them navigate those overwhelming early days?
I would say just allow yourself to have time and space to the extent that you can, to just kind of process everything that's changing, because it's really easy to just kind of um, almost act like nothing different is happening, because you do have to still live your daily life. And in a way, those routines help you get through the day, but they can also prevent you from taking a moment and really processing the change, the grief, the loss, the identity, all of that. Um, yeah, that's what I would say, is just take the space and time.
Yeah, I think it's so common that we tend not to do that very well. And that's kind of how we can get stuck is we don't process what we're going through because
Mhm.
as you know, either you left or we're left or whatever, it is still a death of relationship and it still needs to be grieved, right? And I'm so glad today that we talked about kind of the money and the identity issue today. So do you want to give everyone your webpage or anything that you have coming up?
Sure, my website is insightfinancialcoaching.com, and that's the best place to find me and to learn about my programs.
Awesome. Well, it was great having you on, Sabrina. Hope to have you back on for some more great information, especially around the money and divorce, because that's very vital. And I know you do a lot of good coaching for those people who really need it. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
Thank you for joining today's discussion with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guest. If you're finding value in our podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube channel at Divorce Workshop. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. For a comprehensive divorce guide, check out our Just Separated workbook on Amazon worldwide. This workbook covers everything from emotions and co-parenting to finances, legal insights, and recovery, a must-have for anyone navigating separation or divorce.